coming today. Well, before I start, let me first take a picture for my wife, as I shouldn't be actually presenting. Hey, glimpse of our result. All right, so on a serious note, if you are in QA in your organization, you actually, what are you doing? Actually influencing the future, right? So you actually are the people who are creating the future of your organization. And on one hand. On another hand, you yourself personally need to be able to prepare for what comes up next. Right now, you probably know what's outlined right now in test automation space. All people would love to get to DevOps, CI, CD, and so on and so forth. Like this is where we are right now, Selenium and such. But how the field will look tomorrow, how everything will look in 10 years from now. So is it where it should go and where it will most probably go, and how you personally can adapt to that, and what you should be thinking about such that you prepare yourself for what next to come. Okay, so and I believe that the largest disruptor in the industry in QA, not only in QA, but as you very well know, in QA in particular, is AI. Well, as you very well know, it's a little bit overhyped because AI, of course, is not on a level where it can take off your job, right, and do things for you. And it's not going to be next 10 years for sure. However, there are applications from already existing AI which could help with different small things here and there. In general, if you think about it, humans became humans because they used tools. And the efficiency of tools is what got us here, right? So remember, the transition between like horses and cars. So like it doesn't matter that you are such a good professional to take care of a horse and care of horses, and you are a perfect horse rider if cars come into play, right? It's just going to completely take over and change it as a playing field. This is what we will be talking about here. All right, so first of all, test automation of what? So there are a lot of different fields where you can do automation of testing, and we will be just talking about the first three. Of course, we will not cover APIs, IT devices, and cars, because those are completely different topics to talk about. I'm not probably an expert in cars automation, etc. So what current challenges do we have today with automation? Right? Sometimes when you look into test cases, which you have documented, and you're trying to assess, is this test case automatable? Today, like there are all of these different things which affect what can be automated and how good your automation could be, right? And like example would be two-factor authentication. Right now, a lot of people think, hey, if I'm having two-factor authentication, I cannot automate this test case. Well, capture clearly was designed to prevent automation in the first place. Third-party systems might be a gigantic challenge in automation, like for many different reasons. Like, for example, we can't allow parallel testing. We can't allow you to test multiple systems, because yes, your system would allow it, but this third party you're relying on actually didn't give you a capability to to run many different tests from different systems at the same time. Ever-changing UI. So what are you doing if your engineers are working a little bit too fast? So your stuff is constantly changing, and it could be come in two flavors. It could be everything looks the same, but HTML is completely changing, right? So they migrated from Angular to React, everything broke down. Or it might be completely different. The actual UI is changing. So it used to be one way, now it's completely different way. You used to be able to buy this one button, now you have to add your product into cart in order to be able to purchase it. So how do you deal with these challenges, how to adapt? And of course, physical non-computer interfaces, but actually probably, which is for real not automatable, is that you need to make sure that if certain processes are complete and the person on the counter pressed this button, the counter actually opens. So that's, you probably have to test that manually. I don't know if technically you can actually automate that, although people try to, right? Because given that, if you install if you expanded the third-party system where you can apply AI in order to be able to detect, like you set up a camera and you detect that your counter actually opens or not. So this way you can actually automate. The point being is AI is helping us to rethink what is automatable and what is not automatable in the first place. All right, so shocking discoveries, and I talked to people in Gartner, analysts, as well as like a lot of like IDG and so on and so forth. Forrester, they have exactly the same data. Like if you guys are connected to with your organization to Forrester, Gartner, and others, you can confirm this data. Today, in 2022, 70% of test cases are executed manually. If you think about it, it's just complete shock. And if you think your organization is not doing good, like look at the statistics. So you're probably somewhere around average. It's not because it's bad across the board, not just in your organization around changes. And what does it lead to? Well, because you can't retest everything manually every single time. Like there was the research assessing how much damage do you get from bugs in production, and that is $1.7 billion. Happy to share that link. All right, so you already have Selenium. What's the problem? Right, so why didn't we automate all of those 70% of the rest of the test cases everyone has? Well, it's not that simple. Is it rough? Okay. All right, so basically, let me go into a little bit of, on a tangent, a little bit details, and tell you like what happened in the industry and why what used to work no longer works. Well, let's remember where Selenium comes from. And it's always waves, right? Selenium had been invented in 2004, 2006, I don't remember that exactly. And it depends also on what you count as invented as well. At that time, internet was a little bit different. By the way, like if you're working with Selenium, you're working with basically almost 20-year-old technology. So, and the problem is there's nothing wrong with it, but the internet was very different at that time. So Selenium had been invented to address challenges of automation for the state of the internet, which was back in 2004 or earlier. And at that time, like if you were to look into HTML structure, HTML structure was meaningful. So therefore, if you were to use XPath, XPath would represent a structural place of an element on the page, which makes sense logically from a structural perspective, right? It is in this part of the page, like in this section, and so on and so forth. It was very clear at the time. Because HTML was very straightforward and linear. However, since then, almost 20 years passed, it actually changed dramatically. So right now, HTML no longer represents what people like what we have as a structure of the page. What HTML is right now is just a way to place things in different places. So hey, like we have a div which puts this element here, we have another div which puts this element there, and then engineers might get even more nested structure just to make it work, because it's a little bit of a challenge to deal with HTML general and CSS. It's sometimes you have to change the structure just to be able to move elements around visually. So, and because of it, XPath lost its meaning. So neither XPath nor CSS selectors no longer represent anything meaningful in HTML anymore. So any more or less real application in the real world which you deal with, unfortunately that's a reality. So you can't rely on that, because tomorrow there's XPath will change and everything will be broken. Like this is what actually brings people the most work. Actually, in general, I'll talk a little bit more in a second what it is. But my point is, we have to start rethinking of what do we do in order to be able to address modern way of building applications. Right? So how do we support things like Angular, React, other frameworks, and modern dynamic way of building HTML pages and mobile applications, like in ever-changing world, right? So what is the most efficient way to do that? And for that, I would argue is your specification, whatever you wrote in your own test cases in English, is probably the best way to graph it. Right? So as soon as, because if you think about it, there is a little bit of a difference right now, or is a disconnect between how people are executing tests manually versus how people write code to automate those tests. And that disconnect should probably go away. That's probably the largest challenge. And this, I would argue, the reason why a lot of companies cannot get to their automation levels, which you would like to, is just because all of those, the older way of automation brings up so much maintenance that there is no bandwidth to cover everything else, first of all. And second of all, the way how you do it is no longer making sense. It used to in 2004, but in 2022 it's a little bit dated and no longer reflects modern applications. So, like if you look into that, on the right you might see something which you might write in your test case, for manual execution. On the left, you can see it is a kind of simplified Selenium script to do the same thing. And I'm saying simplified because all of you know that you actually just write gigantic framework first, and then on top of that framework, you build a lot of abstraction and do a lot of stuff in order to make it work. It's just like very, very, very simplified how it looks through. Anyway, so but a couple of things I would like to point out here. So the first of all is clearly you have to be an engineer in order to be able to understand what's going on the Selenium part, right? That's only part of the issue. So it actually goes beyond that. So think about it. So you are as a QA engineer, or your colleague, for that matter, you're build those tests. Let's say you build a certain number of tests, and then those tests actually found a bug, and the test which found the bug failed, which is great, right? But nobody knows what those tests found. So you cannot give it to like product manager and say, hey, look, like this is a bug. You can't even give it to engineers, say, hey, look at the bug. You, as the QA engineer who wrote those tests, have to look into that, understand what happened, and then translate it into normal human language, explaining to people, hey, actually we found the bug. It's not just random flakiness that failed. We actually found the bug, and this is it. So the problem here, as you can see, is this is separation of basically of automation from the rest of the team, right? So you're basically kind of an isolated island right now because you write tests, that's great, but the only people who can deal with those tests are QA engineers who wrote them. So you cannot even understand what's going on if they fail, even where they do find bugs, that's the whole point of it, and this is how it works usually, but however, in order to translate it to human language engineers. But that's actually the smallest part of the challenge. The largest part here is reliance on details of implementation. Remember we're talking about that there is a difference between how testing should be done, and that's like, or you would do it as a human, versus how machines would do it. So like when you do it in Selenium, and basically any other system, you would rely on things like IDs, isn't here, a name, and this ridiculous XPath, and all of those things might change, right, tomorrow. Even IDs. If engineers migrate from Angular to React, there is a good chance that your IDs will completely go away. You will no longer be able to rely on IDs. And if your code relied on IDs, then you have to rewrite literally the whole framework from scratch. It's actually not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is the simplest for engineers. That is updating the library, which, for example, used to render the tables. Like, you know, if you're dealing with business application, which majority of you probably are, you know that you deal with a lot of tables all the time, right? So there's tables saying, hey, well, there's orders, and then there's a column in orders, status, and you need to validate that your order, which you just created, has status in process, progress, process, or whatever. Now imagine you wrote code which does it, but it would rely on the structure of how it's coded in HTML, meaning that it would rely on the fact that your HTML has a table, and there are TRs to represent rows and TDs to represent columns. And it works good and all to a certain degree, of course, but now tomorrow, engineers just update the library which they use to render the tables, and now those tables are rendered purely as divs. There is no table structure. So again, also the code, test code will fail, and you'll have to rewrite it from scratch. So why am I mentioning all these things? Once again, I want to point out to the point that like there is currently the largest challenges people hit with automation is because of they rely on those ways to how people coded the page rather than relying on how it works from a user's perspective. Then people do manual testing, there is no such thing, right? You just say, hey, like in a table, whatever looks like a table, like in this row, like this column should contain this element. And it doesn't matter that engineers changed how table is rendered, because as soon as it works from a user's perspective, nobody cares how it is implemented. Right? So for end-to-end test, it doesn't matter. And basically, my point is, like AI can actually help us to move away from relying on those implementation details, which, mind you, should be tested by engineers in their unit tests. For sure, this is engineering work, this is not QA work. When we're talking about end-to-end tests, like AI can actually help us to get to a level where we can now talk from a user's perspective. And this is, for example, what this trigger is doing, and this code on the right is actually an executable code. It does exactly the same thing as code. All right, so how bad is this problem? So this reliance on details of implementation creeps in on you, actually, little by little, and I would, like, based on our experience, this is number one problem why you don't have 100% of your test cases up. Because think about it. So if you're starting to automate at the beginning, and it all great and rosy, and you build your framework, it might take you a little bit of time, and you build some tests at the beginning pretty quickly, that as you build more and more, and engineers, like you don't build in a vacuum, right? While you're building tests, engineers are adding their own changes. And as they are adding their own changes, you have to fix your tests. And because of this reliance on details of implementation, because engineers constantly changing those details of implementation, you have to invest more and more time to adapt to those changes as soon as you grow the number of tests. So much so that at some point you level out. And based on our statistics, at around 350 Selenium tests per person, it's a full-time job to just maintain the test. And it's not fun, right? Think about it. So you came to work not to maintain someone else's test, you came to work to automate. And you want to automate, but like, isn't it awful that you can't, because all you do is just maintaining the test. It's a disaster. So, and we believe the solution is exactly that, to stop relying on details of implementation and shift purely to end user's perspective on how system works. And this is what this trigger, for example, would like. In general, now think about it from a different perspective. So how would you do, how do you do automation today? How people are getting into automation, and what's required to do automation? And that is, you're starting from learning a programming language. Let's say you start with Java, then you do Selenium, and you can't do Selenium until you do Java, at least the basics of Java. And but then if you learn Selenium, you don't know automation, because Selenium and automation is two different things. Selenium is just a tool, automation is automation, nothing to do with a tool. There are certain concepts which you have to understand in order to be able to use it. For example, repeatability, right? You can't, if you're testing, the simple example, if you're testing sign-up flow, you cannot reuse exactly the same email, right? It's just not going to go for second time. You have to be able to generate mail and so on and so forth. So you're learning those automation concepts on the job. So basically what it means is that people who are coming up, or even to you, like if you switch from manual QA to automation QA, you learn all of those languages, frameworks, and then when you come into the job, you can't actually do a proper job because nobody taught you automation concepts. Because the tools and concepts are two different things. So you learn a job, and it's not great for everyone, right? What does it mean you learn concepts of test automation on the job? It means that you're not actually doing a good job. Because you might not know certain best practices, you might not know certain ways how to do it properly, and that means that your manager is not happy, that means that you're underperforming at the beginning. Until you learn all those concepts, actually you do better. And then you slowly start building tests, and then as you build tests, you spend more and more time on maintenance, and if okay, I actually came here to do the automation, no, I do now full time is maintaining tests. This is not fun. So what I believe is going to happen in the next 5-10 years is that we'll switch things around. So first of all, people need to start learning automation concept first, because it does not matter what programming framework you are using. Like using AI, using test trigger, using Selenium, using Playwright, it doesn't matter. The automation concepts stay exactly the same across the board. So the point that you have to generate data in order to be repeatable in some ways. The point that you probably should end your test with the validation as the best practice. And so on and so forth. Tons of those examples. Like those are generic concepts which would apply across the board. It doesn't matter what kind of tool you use. So I believe people should start from learning those concepts, which unfortunately are not taught widely, but we're going to change it. We're working on it. So we'll release the concepts by then. Then actually, test automation shouldn't be that hard. Because think about it. So what's the goal of test automation? The goal of test automation is to make sure that the product works from a user's perspective, right? So literally, what does it mean is that you as a human come in, do it manually, and you should be able to do that, right? So if you can do it manually, then therefore the tools should allow those manual testers or you as an automation engineer to do the same thing easy, right? It shouldn't be different from how you would express it for manual testing. It should be exactly the same, so it shouldn't be that a big deal to actually learn automation. And then, maintenance, as I mentioned, is actually mostly product. There's different things which come into maintenance, but I believe the majority of the maintenance is a byproduct of relying on details of implementation. If you kill that, you kill the majority of the maintenance. And then, if you think about it, there shouldn't be a difference, or this big difference between tests and test cases written for manual execution. It should be almost the same thing, because conceptually it's the same. Moreover, it should be the same because whatever you're verifying should work from a user's perspective. And therefore, it doesn't matter if you execute this manually or your automation will execute it. Number one, it should work the same way. And number two, it should be executed the same way, in the sense that it should do the same thing. It shouldn't rely on detailed implementation. It should literally do the same thing. All right. So, but that's not only one thing you should be prepared for. Like is the use of AI, how AI can be used today, even today. So test offering. Well, actually, two ways how AI can help build tests, three ways actually. So, well, number one, it can infer based on looking into application what kind of tests should be written in certain cases. Test, it can help you to add additional parameters into existing tests. It can build tests based on how your users are using the application, if we have statistics on that. And it will help you to just go step by step and complete, like, well, you can think of it as autocomplete. It's actually started to use AI as well to do more and more in order to be able to help you to write tests. Element detection. So remember what I was talking about when I was talking about, like, hey, build stuff from a user's perspective. And that goes a little bit beyond what would you do. It's like, for example, if you remember the applications where you would have icons. So nobody writes a button saying delete. Well, people do sometimes, but oftentimes, especially in the tables, it's just this icon. This icon for delete, this icon for user, this icon for this, for that, and so on and so forth. So, and then when you write manual test cases, you don't care like how they are implemented. There might be literally no indication that delete is delete, other than that this delete icon looks like a trash bin, right? So, and that basically, in order for your automation to be able to now do that, you need to rely on image classification, which is a subset of AI. So that's an example. Well, test writing assistance I already mentioned, and test adaptation. So basically, if you're, let me explain what I mean by that. I'll just give you an example. It's kind of getting to the next level. If you look in here, so we didn't say enter username in the username field and enter password in the password field and create login. One, why did you use login? It's because login can change, and it did. If you remember, for example, Gmail, you used to specify your username and password and click login, you would be logged in. Now you specify username and you click next, then you specify password and you click login and you log in. So it's a change of the login flow. But it doesn't matter, because from a user's perspective, it's still login. For majority of your tests shouldn't fail just because engineers change the way how you log in. So if you think about it, now first we talked about stability on the level of dealing with events. Now we're talking about stability on functional level. There are certain things on the functional level that you as a user expect and express in English that stays the same even though details how these functions are performed change. Then login is probably the most classical example where you can literally, it can change and there's like limited ways how you can log in. Like so all of that is straightforward, and you don't want to code all the ways how you log in into your application. You wanted to say login and make it, and basically rely on the fact that the system will log you regardless how it works. So this is what I'm talking about, adaptation to new changes of functionality. As soon as it is the same from our human perspective, right? Because like another thing which you need to remember when you're doing that is that like you shouldn't pass the things which are actually bugs and just in order to effort to make your test green, because like that's not the point. For example, like if your in certain cases, if functionality of application have changed, your test should fail, because you don't know that this change of how system works, is it intentional or is it a bug? That's basically your job in music as a QA is to make sure that you catch those issues, and only you as a human, it's a human job to assess if it's an issue or it's a feature. So machines would never be able to do that because it's a domain knowledge. You as a human are the only people who would possess enough domain knowledge to assess that certain change is a bug or a feature starting from a certain level. Basic things, yes, like different ways to log in, sure. It's the same thing, it's just different ways to do the same thing. However, in a lot of cases, it's not. All right. Yeah, at the end, actually, sorry, I went a little bit over all of that, but I'm happy to take the questions. Yes.
Could you go to the slide where you are talking about the new way to do automation?
Sorry, what?
Could you go to the slide where you are talking about new way to...
In any cases, in case of recording play, recording is just a way to give you these steps. It doesn't even give you the code at the end, right? Because it doesn't know, for example, if you're recording the sign up flow like that, you actually need to generate the email, right? Every time differently. So you have to like specify all these kind of things. So any recorder will not help you to build, will not build tests for it. It will help you to build tests, but it will not actually make tests. So let me show you what I mean by that. So for example, good internet, let's forget. Here, let's use sign up for this interesting person. Of course, let's do that first. Then I'll show you like what you let's see correctly. Okay. As you can see here, like you can't guess, like no amount of AI would guess that in certain cases data needs to be generated. Right? It will just record whatever you enter, and that's it. And in this particular case, it recorded after click. And this thing is not gonna even go second time. It's not gonna go anywhere, I'm just cancel it. Anyway, so but other than that, as you can see, it's not just about the recording, it's the result of the recording, right? If you're using a tool like Selenium IDE, your result is Selenium code, but it would rely on XMAPs, right? If you're using test trigger as a recording, like test trigger will try to infer what did you mean. So it's the difference between Selenium IDE recorder and test trigger recorder. Selenium IDE literally exactly just records identical actions with XMAPs and such like that. Whereas in test trigger, it tries to guess what you do mean by clicking this button. which is a little bit tougher job. But anyway, so let's fix this thing. First of all, of course, we need to fix this email as a possible. Notation. As an example, email. And I'll point out those concepts, right? How did we go through all of those concepts? Here, so I check that email to copy email. Was received. Let's go update and retest while I'm talking about it. Let me open it up. So, anyway, so right now, as you can see here, we're now using actually at least 3 different concepts of automation. Well, first of all, is the concept, the most important one, that test needs to be repeatable. Without generating new unique email every single time, it's just not going to go through, right? However, repeatability itself will actually break down to several sub-concepts. In this particular case, it is unique data generation. In this case, we generate unique email. Next, you need to be able to use that data. You know, how do you check that email? You need to store it into variable. So the next concept here is using variables, right? And what, where it goes, let's see, yeah. It's there somewhere here, let's see. Okay, so it didn't, I guess, record that there is a date. So we didn't enter as a date. Did we need to click create new account? I'm not sure if we need to click create new account.
Yeah, Artem, we can take the next.
But anyway, so my point is, well, you just ignore it and see. My point is, you can, and there are tools like these available. It's just you need to follow.
Okay, but will we be able to, integrate this complete test automation suite into our CI/CD pipeline?
Of course.
Okay. So it will perform all the actions, and then it will also log a report, like pass-fail kind of a report.
Okay, if you're talking about test trigger, yes, of course. So, like, there is no automation tool would make any sense without CI/CD integration.
Yeah.
It's just
That's
like a completely useless. Moreover, particularly in case of test trigger, because the point of test trigger is relying on end user's perspective as opposed to details of implementation. Test trigger intentionally does not store any additional data, therefore it's all plain text, therefore you can actually keep the tests themselves in your own Git and then test trigger your CI/CD. Sorry for the next question.
Artem, first of all, thank you for explaining this low code concept. So what's your opinion on scriptless automation or to touchless automation? How we can achieve this? Touchless automation.
What's that? Can you explain
I'm
it?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
because
Yeah, it's working.
it's working. See, the future of automation. I was just going through some of the articles in the internet. They are saying low code, no code concept. So whatever you explained now in the test trigger, and there is one more concept is coming like the touchless automation. Without touching the code, we can do the automation, or without touching the application, we can do the automation. Do you have any idea on that?
Like without any code, well, it depends on the definition of the code. So is that thing which I showed you, is it a code or not?
Yeah.
Like when you generate this click and all this kind of stuff, you can argue that it's both code and not code, because it's a code because like you would use similar concepts like variable in a little bit different way though, and it's not code because this is very similar to what you would write your test case from execution. So like it's just based on your definition, but yes, it is in this area of codeless, no code, low code.
Means whatever you are trying to say is it is based on the perception and the end user who is going to use this code, right? So because if I am a tester or the executor, it will be a touchless script for me. I can take it in that way. Suppose if I am a developer of the automation, I have to do some backend coding to make the enable this, right?
I'm not completely understanding.
Okay, I will talk to you afterwards.
He'll talk to you offline.
Okay.
In the interest of the time, I will talk to you afterwards.
Okay.